To start with the blockout section, I would say this part is one of the most important parts. Blockout actually helps you to preview the result. It helps you to set the volumes, the directions, and style of hair itself. For example, you have the already made character, which is missing the hairstyle, and your blockout helps you to preview the exact form and the exact flow of your future hair on this character. So yes, I would say it's one of the most important parts, because about base for textures, like with the Xgen and modifiers and bake, I will be always saying just save your time, make it as fast as possible, and keep going. But as for blockout, I would definitely recommend you to spend your time wisely on this section, this very important step. So the blockout will take you only 2 or 3 hours, maybe less, and we will be making the blockout for textures and blockout for mesh itself. So be prepared. And it's not a secret, we will start with finding references. I usually just open up Pinterest and look through all different stuff on it, because it's extremely useful tool in searching different references. But please make sure not to go wild and have 100 or 200 different references, because you won't need them. Usually there are like 10 or 15 main references from different angles, different views, which is super important. And also you will need to have like 4 or 5 extra references for super small flyaways and hairs. The problem with Pinterest sometimes, like usually with all these images, they have medium or low quality, and you don't really see the flyaways because the picture is too small. So you will need to find the images with the high resolution, where you can look for flyaways and their flow, their directions. Also, when I'm missing some important references, for example, the exact views that I couldn't find on Pinterest, and it happens sometimes, I usually go to Google. I just type in, for example, ponytail, the front view, or ponytail, the top view. Google is extremely useful in this way, because for some specific angles, it really gives you what you want. Then I would also recommend the photo references from this website. I included in my presentation. It's not an advertisement, but I really like the resource itself, because each person, they make different, they make a photo set of each person from different angles, like from 20 different angles, and super cool. I've never seen such detailed references. You can buy them, each image, for like, they're not really expensive. I just don't remember the exact price. I also suppose that you can download some low resolution images from here just for free. But make sure to visit this website. Maybe if it has some certain hairstyle which you're looking for, you can buy just the exact view, for example the top view, which is super handy, and it will be high resolution and all flyaways, they're gonna be there. And of course I'm going for ArtStation, because it's a secondary references. It means that these references are from artists which already view all the primary references, like the real life references, and then they are interpreted it themselves, and then they created something based on real life references. So this is why it's called secondary references, and some artists, they don't recommend to follow them, but I would definitely do, because you can actually see other artists' best results. It also helps you to understand the industry standards, as some artists are super nice and they usually include info about their poly count, about their textures, and yes, it's super cool. Don't miss this opportunity. You can also look up for some good solutions for very specific tasks like braids or dreadlocks. You can usually see how other artists sorted out this problem with different types of hair, with different types of tasks. I also attached the hair schemes, which can be super useful but please be careful in using them. It's just an overpaint, so you can do it yourself actually, and I really recommend you to make it before you're doing the real hairstyle with your hair cards. I recommend you to overpaint the references. But as for these schemes, they are for hair growth and hairlines. So they can only apply to very short hair, for example, men, short hair, or brows, because usually the hair direction are the same. Of course, it differs from person to person, but usually you have quite the same rules for hairlines and hair direction. It only applies to short hair because when you have a long hairstyle, hair falls under their own weight. And that's why, of course, they never grow in this direction. If it's a really, really long hair, you will never see hair growing like this. They will fall under the weight. These schemes are very helpful in terms of lines. Well, just pay attention to these very special angles, yes, these very special zones where hair grow and don't grow. So I also attach it for your convenience. For the mesh blockout, we will be using ZBrush and I will tell you all about it. But like the main things are brushes, which I'm using. They are super standard. They're Move Clay Build Up Dam Standard. I really think that you know them. And curved tube for some extra cases. I also exported with decimation about 80%. As for our ZBrush blockouts, I would say that the most important things are these four. Make sure to apply the volumes, which will be on your future hairstyle. So please check volumes from different angles, because sometimes from this angle it looks very, very nice, but from another angle it just looks weird, because hair, they don't lay like that, they don't kind of stand like that. Always remember about the gravity and about the weight of the hairs, because they're gonna fall. Yes, if we're talking about natural hairstyles, of course. Also remember about direction. If you're gonna sculpt the direction of your hair strands, this will really help you a lot. This will save you so much time, because you won't be thinking about placing each hair strand. Shall I place it this way or that way, this direction, or maybe a bit kind of left or right? Because you have already made your life easier on the blockout step. So direction is super important. The hairline is vital for the believability of your hairstyle. If you want your hairstyle look natural, then make sure to replicate the hairline from references, yes. Because some artists or some young artists, they just make the hairline look like this, like the circle line, and that's all, without any types of angles, areas, any types of special zones, and it just doesn't look natural. Pay attention to anatomy. So you really need to replicate very special pattern of hair growing, and it also applies to the back view. And please don't spend hours on your hairstyle. It usually takes like from half an hour to 2 hours, but no longer. Just because you won't really need these details. I would say that these blockouts are over detailed. This one is ideal. Yeah, it's good. I would say follow this example in terms of details, because it will save your time and you already have everything you need for your work. Okay, let's talk a bit about textures. We will be blocking the textures in Photoshop. We will be just painting them, but you can do it in the software you're used to, which is comfortable for you. This is my recommendation list. I really think that this one is most handy in terms of creating a hairstyle, but please do experiment, do play with all this stuff. This list is just a recommendation, and you can do on your texture whatever you want. So map sizes, they can actually be different, super different. Usually you will have the requirements for the hairstyle. If it's not your personal projects, then you will be set like, okay, in this game we have like 2K textures and you need to create one. This will be quadra texture or rectangular texture. But Like in 90%, I would say that usually textures are quadra. I mean, they're 1K on 1K or 2K on 2K or 4K on 4K. I rather saw that textures can be rectangular. For example, 1K or 2 on 2K. You don't really need to worry about it because these requirements will be already in your task. If it's not, make sure to ask your lead or your boss which sizes you need to preserve. I would say a few words about hair textures. Sometimes in your task, you have like make this hairstyle and make a hair texture for it. Then you have one texture for one hairstyle. And in game, there are like many characters, each with its own hairstyle. Or you can have one texture for multiple hairstyles. It's different case. For example, your task would be like, okay, create one texture for several hairstyles, and all these hairstyles have like straight hairs. And then you should create one texture for several hairstyles. Or you can also be asked to create an atlas for many different types of hairstyles, and usually atlases are used for all the hairstyles you have in a specific game. These are texture examples which I will show later. This is for curly hair, for straight, and for short straight. Sometimes artists also leave the spare space or free space for their textures, because once they are making the hairstyles with the hair cards and they understand that they are missing some specific hair strand, which would be very handy to have, they can just fill the spare space with this very specific hair strand. And you should also take into account the length of the future hairstyle, because the longer hair you have, the more details you're going to include into the hair strands. Because if your hair is super long, you will be going to scale this strand and all the details in it will be scaled as well. So, but the shorter the hair, the less different details it has. Okay, as for texture for several hairstyles, I have this set of different women hairstyles, and they're all made of one set of maps. In modern games, they're always talking about optimization stuff, and if you can save texture space or if you can save some poly count, it's always appreciated. So the best option for every game developer, I would say, is to have one map for many hairstyles, as many as it can have. In atlases, you usually include like curly hair, noisy hair, straight hair, or very shorty hair. You should think of all the different types of hairstyles you're gonna make with it. Sometimes eyebrows and eyelashes are also included into these atlases. Sometimes they're in different atlas. And yes, so I think that's all. Okay, the main idea is to make your life easier by generating the blockout texture, because sometimes while generating Xgen here, you suddenly realize that you are stuck, that you don't know where to place each hair strand, or you just don't know what they should be like. This is a time when you need to look at your blockout and everything becomes kind of simple and obvious. So the first thing you should do is to divide your texture into 3 different sections. Each section is for each layer of your future hairstyle. So the first section contains 2 or 3 very dense, very opaque hair strands, which you would use for your first layer. You usually want your first layer to be very opaque so that you can see your character's scalp. That's why these are the most dense of your hair strands, and you want to make sure they don't have gaps. In the second section, I create 2 or 3 hair strands which are for my second layer. This second layer must be must give you diversity and different forms and volumes. So make sure to make your hair strands kind of different from each other. in terms of forms, in terms of flyaways. Some of them can have only one clump just in the end, and the other may have like 2 or 3 clumps. And usually you want to make these hair strands, like medium hair strands with different gaps, just because through these gaps you will see the hair strands from your first layer, and it will give extra volume to your hairstyle, and it's very, very important. So make sure you have like 2 or 3 gaps in each hair strand, like I have in my hair strands in the second section. In the third one, I place very, very thin and the least opaque hair strands, or just separated hairs. These are for my third layer of the hairstyle. They should really kind of be super transparent, and they just have to make your hairstyle alive. They have to break the first and the second layers. So in the bottom, I usually place some hair strands for a transition zone for your hairline when hairs just start to grow on your character's scalp. I also create some curly and clumpy hair strands, which are good for some zones, for example, where your ears are. And I also create one very short hair strand because in men hairstyles, there are usually some gradients between very long hair strands and very short ones. So you have to keep it in mind. You don't want to spend too much time on this texture block out. Like this took me about 15 minutes or so. Maybe I made it too detailed. You don't need too much details in your blockout texture because there is no need in it. But you have to make it very kind of very clear where your hair strands start and where they end, and also where you place them, how opaque and thick are they, and also how many gaps they have. These are the most important things. In this part, I also create blockout texture for curly hairstyle. You know, it's all about the same, making 2 or 3 thick hair strands, 2, 3 medium ones, and 2, 3 the least opaque, and very kind of lots of flyaways, very transparent for your third layer. And remember, there is no need in creating too many of your hair strands, just because it's quite enough to have 6 or 8 for 3 of your layers. Because I remember that I used to create like 10 or 15 of them, and you spend too much time. There is also no need in it, just because with 2, 3 for each layer, you already have enough diversity. Just believe me. Sometimes you would need to create atlases, which are used for different hairstyles with different hairs, with different types of hair. For example, short, long, curly, straight, or afro hair, or even dreadlocks. Usually artists leave some free spaces if, for example, they would need to include some other hair strands in future. Oh, also sometimes in such atlases, artists include even textures for eyebrows and eyelashes. For example, in this case, we draw like a eyebrow, and then we include different separated strands for eyebrow to make it kind of to have volume in it. And also on the right, I'm drawing some of textures for eyelashes. They just have to be longer and they have to be clumpy, because usually you see how your eyelashes clump. And then you have to place it to make the placement kind of effective, and to leave place for different hair strands. Okay, for example, we want to create a ponytail, and this is one of the most popular hairstyles in games. More popular is only kind of bun hairstyle, just because you don't have to animate it at all. But of course, men hairstyles are super popular because of the same reason, actually. Okay, the first thing I would do is to download PureRef, open it up, and then start looking through Pinterest. And also make sure you have changed your mode to be on top in your PureRef. And for example, we are making a personal project and we don't have something specific in mind. So we just kind of grab any references which we like. But if we would have a specific task, then we would look for very specific references for this task. I also look for some references with very clear anatomy features, for example, hairlines, because I'm making ponytail and probably on my future hairstyle, the line where my hair starts to grow will be seen very clear. I also try to look for references with different angles, like 2 or 3 from the front part, 2 or 3 from sides, and 2, 3 from the back. I also love references where you can see different layers, like this one. For example, you can see how hair strands lay on each other and how they create volumes. This one is also very good, and we will take it. And actually, it's nothing fancy here. You just go through Pinterest, go through Google and or any other browser you're using, and grab any references you like. Of course, if you're making your personal project, I mean. It's also very important to look for high resolution images just because we're looking for details, for flyaways, and for such things. And also make sure that the picture is not using too much filters because filters usually also destroy many details. And we're looking for details. They make our hairstyle lifelike and believable. All flyaways are very, very important, unless you're making something very kind of stylized, but usually you're making real-time hair, right? As I've said, nothing fancy. Just collect your images, make sure there are not so many of them, like not hundreds of references, because you don't need them, and it's some kind of procrastination to search for references for 2 or 3 hours. So don't do that. After that, you want to sort out your references. For example, by the way, it's Control plus P in PureRef to make them align to each other. And then I just grab some references from the same views. For example, on the top, there are references from the back, from the ponytail itself, and others are from sides, and also 3 on the bottom are from the front, where you can see the hair growth line. Also make sure you checked the real-time here on ArtStation because it's a great source of your inspiration, of artistic references, of artistic interpretations. It's super important to search for other artists' results, what they actually succeeded to achieve, and to stay on top, to be updated. And simply, you want to make sure that your work would be on the same level or won't be kind of any weaker. So that's why I also grabbed these references as well. The next step is creating blockout, mesh blockout, and you can do it wherever you want, like in Mudbox, in Blender, in ZBrush. I'm doing it in ZBrush because I'm used to it. And I also attached these 2 fancy hats. They have kind of realistic proportions, but I have to say that they have a very kind of bad topology for games, so don't use them as your meshes in games. Please don't do this. They are just like mannequins. And that's all. The first thing I would do is I will create the hairline, for which I will be using the control masking, and I will also switch to lasso type of mask. This step is very important for creating your future hairstyle, so pay attention to it. Watch angles, watch distances of each part of your hairline. And also for women, the hair growth line is kind of smoother and you don't see very sharp angles, but for men it's the opposite. So we're making it very smooth. So take your time. I will also attach hair growth pictures which can help you. And then I use extract. The default settings are okay actually. And we're extracting this masked geometry. And now we have this very fancy hair cup, which we will be sculpting. And make sure to kind of have your references on top. You have your pure ref, which is extremely handy. Then I'm smoothing the edges and just making sure that my hairline is fine. Yes, it's okay. And then I will be masking the bottom of this hair cup by switching to Gizmo mode on W and just clicking with control on the bottom polygroup. By clicking on the free space on your document, you're inverting the mask. So now you're sculpting only on the outer part of your hairstyle, of your hair cap, of your future hairstyle, okay? And actually, the process is quite simple. I'm using only kind of 3 brushes. It's a move brush, which I'm creating big forms with, and then it's clay build-up and damp standard, of course. In here, I'm also using in flat, just because the hair cup might be a bit too thin, and that's why when I dynamesh it, there are kind of some bugs in it. So firstly, I inflate this hair cup, and then I can dynamesh it with no harm to my geometry. But I obviously need a higher resolution, so I make the resolution a bit higher and then I dynamesh it and then I kind of go on with the process of sculpting. Now I need my ponytail. I'm masking the space where the ponytail should be created. And then I'm looking for some references because I need to choose which hairstyle I want to make. Okay, let's decide on this one. It has some very, very fancy forms and it's kind of interesting. I also use in flat when I need it, and I'm masking the parts of geometry which I'm working on. I dynamesh it every time I feel like I've tweaked the geometry a lot. I use them standard a lot. It helps me to define the forms, to define volumes and directions. With the standard mode, it pushes the geometry in, and by clicking Alt, you're using inverted mode, which pushes the geometry out. Every time I'm checking that my hairline is in the right position and in the right place. Okay, then I can use the brush for inserting some extra geometry, like this one. I'm in primitives. And make sure your symmetry is on. I'm adding these two strands for the front part. Then I'm smoothing and sculpting them just like I did before sculpting the base. So 90% of time you're using just these 3 brushes. It's move, it's clay build-up, and damp standard. And actually that's all. But you can also kind of create these parts of hair strands of your hairstyle with different brushes like this one, like IMM primitives. Okay, now I need to split my geometry. I make sure that these 2 parts are masked, and then I click the split masked parts. I will also show you the alternative way of creating the separated strands, which can be useful. Now we're looking for another brush. It's curved tube, And for this brush, we need to change the default settings to make the hair strands kind of more look like hair strands. So we're going to stroke in the menu, and then we can fix the position of our tubes, but we really don't need this. However, I will show how to lock start and lock end position of your hair strands. Okay, have fun with it. And then we're going to this little window, and we're going to make the graphic which will our hair follow. All we need to click on the size, and we can create any form we like. To refresh the preview, you just need to click it with your curved tube on. As simple as that. You can play with it until you're going to be satisfied. After you created the initial form of your hair strand with the curved tube, you can just switch to any other brush, continue sculpting it with the move brush or with clay buildup. That's what I'm going for. Oh, by the way, you can also unlock the length, make it longer anytime you like if you're in this mode. So yes, I've switched to another brush, and now I'm sculpting it as well as other parts of my hairstyle. And you can also kind of duplicate your hair strand by clicking Ctrl and grabbing your polygroup. Now I just split the geometry of these two hair strands, on the front, and then dynameshed it. It's not really important how you achieve this block out. Remember that this shouldn't be too detailed, because the only thing you need from this block out, like main forms, main volumes, and main directions. Actually, that's all. Because don't go for any details. Sometimes you need them. For example, if you need like specific hair strands which you want to have in your future hairstyle, you can include them, but please don't spend too much time on your block out. For example, 30 minutes or 1 hour is quite enough for standard hairstyles. Some more complicated, they usually take more time, but no more than 2 hours or 3 hours. 3 hours is actually like maximum. Okay, once you're satisfied with your hairstyle, you can export it. Just make sure that in your document, the only visible thing is your hairstyle. For example, just hide your head. Then you can click like merge visible, and then you can decimate it with 20 percentage, and that will do. That will be enough. Yes, here I made a mistake. I wanted to separate the frontal strands, so this would be kind of handy to hide and unhide them while placing the hair cards, but I've split it only one, and yeah, then I fixed it and merged the two frontal strands with each other. So I would say this is it. We've got our two blockouts. One is for textures, the other one is for mesh. We've got our reference pack, which we would use throughout the whole process. So yes, we're ready to continue with the Xgen introduction.